Kakadosh Boker Or. Daf Yomi Masechet Batra Daf Kuf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph 131a1. Says the Gemara by Rava. We are going to start two lines down. The second line, okay? Second line by Rava 131a1. Second line by Rava. Rava comes and he asks the following question. We're talking about
whether you can bequeath a disproportionate share of your estate to one of your heirs.
Meaning that you're going to come and you're going to decide, I want this son to inherit more than anybody else. So basically, you're coming and you're taking it's disproportionate. That's what he said, meaning that it's not going to be the regular proportion. So the question is, bebariha, what is halakha to do with Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka, to do with an adam bari, a healthy person? Can he come and give his properties in such a fashion or not? So kika, right? Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. When did Rabbi Yochanan say this? Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka b'shchiv merah, only a person that's on a sick bed, that he's giving his last will. Debar orotehu, because he could right now come and since he's basically going to die, he's on his deathbed. So therefore, in such a case that he's on his deathbed and he's going to give over the properties, so then it makes sense because it says vayab yom chilot banav. It's going to be the day that he's giving over the nachalot to his children. So therefore, it makes sense. He says aval bebari lo, but a healthy person. Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka didn't say such a case, right? 131a1. Yeah. So he says, right? What's halakha? Or dilmar maybe afilu bebari nami. Even in a bari, it's going to be the same halakha. So says the Gemara, Elmaleh Rav Mesharshia l'Rava. Says Rav Mesharshia to Rava. Tashma, we're going to try to bring a proof. The Amal lo Rabbi Natan l'Rebbe. Says Rabbi Natan Bavli to Rebbe. Shenitem mishnatchem Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka. Did you teach your Mishnah according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Broka? The Trambas we learned in the Mishnah. Ilo katavla. What happens if the husband does not write to his wife the condition in the ketubah? Benin dichrin deyavin lach minai. Inun yartun kesef ketubatech yoter al chulukren de machohon. Meaning like this. Remember that there's such a concept of a ketubah. What's a ketubah? Nowadays, the majority of people don't even do ketubah anymore because since according to the secular law, right, a person has to give his wife half of the properties. So therefore, the majority of the times, the ketubah doesn't even, uphold. It's completely different halachot. But let's say you're in a country where a woman does not really get anything, right? So therefore, what happens is that she wanted to be tovea or ketubah. She wants her ketubah. When she would get married, let's say it would be a second marriage. She would make a condition with the husband that her male children will inherit her ketubah separately.
Plus properties that she brought in.
Well, obviously,
from her father.
Obviously.
Otherwise, fathers would not give money to their daughters.
To their daughters. 100%. One more time, which means like this. Remember that a person would be able to get married to different wives, right? Meaning more than one, right? Other than Ashkenazim, obviously, because of the Chemer ben Gershon, right? Or even without the concept of more than one, let's say it was one after another. So you got married, you didn't like the first one, he comes, right? He changed the pair of shoes, got married to the second one. Now, the truth is, the second one, she's coming thinking, 1 second, this guy already has kids. Those kids are going to inherit. She's going to have now kids with him. If her kids and the other kids are going to inherit the exact same thing, 1 second, she's losing out. Why? Because, for example, right, he's got the Bechor, plus he's got, let's say, more male children, whatever the case is. She doesn't want to lose out. So what does she do? She makes a condition. The condition is that when a person gets married, he has to write to his wife a ketubah. And in the ketubah, it's written how much money is he going to give her, whether he divorces her, or, right, in a case where, right, that for example, either divorce or if he dies, what does she get? So usually she's allowed to stay in the house all the time that she's an almana, meaning that as long as she's a widow, the second that she gets married, that's it. Right? The daughters also, because the daughters are able to stay in the house the entire time until they get married, plus they're going to get 10% of the property in order to get married. Okay, that's just the normal thing, which means that they need money to get married. So therefore, it's a 10% that they come, they're able to call and get married. Now, what happens is as follows. She comes and she gets married. She brings in property, right? Plus, her ketubah, let's say, is going to be, I'll just throw up a number, 18,000, 26,000, 52,000. Inflation, every single time it's different. Every person has different ketubot. I was at a ketubah, I remember, in Montreal for 526,000. I was, so you have all the different, you have all different numbers. You understand? So the question now is, she's going to get married. She wants to make a condition. That money, she doesn't want to go in now to the children of the first wife. She wants all the money that's coming in, whether it's from her ketubah or from properties that she brought in or anything that's going to happen. She wants it to go to her personal children, not anybody else's children. So therefore, what happens if she forgot? That's what it says over here. So it says like this. We learned in the Mishnah, Lo katavla, if he did not write the condition, Benin dichrin diyavin lich minai, the male children that I'm going to have from you. Inun yartin kesek v'tubatech, that they are going to yoresh, they're going to have the Yerusha of the ketubah. Yoter al chulkon de machon, right? Besides the portion that they have with the other brothers, chayav, right? He's still going to happen. Shetznai betinu, which means even though it's not written, it's a condition of betin. And since it's a condition of betin, even if it's not written, it doesn't matter. Because since the betin stipulated such a concept, even without writing it, it goes into effect. Okay? Makes sense. Meaning certain things don't always have to be written. It's a stipulation that this is the way that it is. And that's it. You don't have to write anything. The Amalo Rabbi, so says Rabbi to Rabbi Natan, Yisfuntan, right? Or we learn Inun Yisfun, which means, right, that they are going to take it. Which means the Mishnah is not coming and telling us like a Yerusha, right? But rather, it's like a matana. There's a difference between a Yerusha and a matana. Yerusha is an inheritance, and matana is a present. Remember that a person cannot change inheritances, right? Unless, according to Rabbi Yochanan and Ruka, it's one boy amongst other boys, but they can change a present. So, for example, a girl will never inherit if there's boys, but he could give the girl a present. A wife will never inherit if there's children, but he could give the wife a present. So that's called a present. It's not called an inheritance. Because if it's an inheritance, he cannot do that. If it's a present, he can do that. Because a present is given during lifetime, and he could always give a present to whoever he wants, right? There's no problem. Okay? The Amar, yeah. The Amar Rabbi, so says Rabbi, Yaldu Taitabi, right? I had this shtut, Ve'azti fanai benatana bavli, right? And I went and I pushed off the words of Rabbi Natan Bavli, which were not ki'ilu, that they were not proper. Ela de kaimalan, but we actually paskin benin dichrin lo tarfa mi mishabde. Do you know that boys, right? Benin dichrin means banim zecharim. Dachar is zachar, right? Because the dalet and zayin are interchangeable. So therefore, benin dichrin are male children, right? The ketuvah male children, they do not collect from properties that have lien on them. But if you're going to tell me now they're taking a portion as a present and not as an inheritance, so why can't they take it from nechasim meshubadim? Ela shemamina, but rather yartum tanan. The girsa in the Mishnah should not be yisvun, which means that you're getting a present, but rather yirshun, which means you're taking an inheritance, right? Because remember that an inheritance is only after death. A present is during the lifetime, because you can't give a present after death. It's only an inheritance comes after death. Present is during the lifetime, right? And that's what Richard mentioned before, that it's a second before the death, because that's what. So therefore, because of that, the ketubah is not going to be collected from properties that have a lien on it. So man shamale beitle haisvara. Who's the one that says that he holds of this logic? He says of Yochanan Ruka. It's only Yochanan Ruka. Shmamina. So therefore, we learn from here that even in a bari, it's the same halacha. Meaning, shitat Rabbi Yochanan Memruka is that even if a person is healthy, he could change the Yerusha from one boy to another boy to give him more, a disproportionate amount, and it's up to him. He cannot give it to somebody that's not part of the Yerusha. Meaning he can't give it to a girl instead of the boys.
And he also
but he can
take the first portion, the firstborn, that separate part, that double portion, he can't mess with that.
Right, because that's the Torah. But he can change the other ones, one boy to another boy. Okay? Yeah. Elmaleh. Right, so Elmaleh of Papa Labai. It says of Papa Labai. Whether according to the mandama that says Yisfunu, Yirtum. That means it doesn't matter what's the Gisah of the Mishnah, whether it's a present, which is Yisfun, or Yirtum, which is the Yerusha, which is an inheritance. We know that a person cannot acquire something which has not come to the world, something else, to somebody else. Meaning, I cannot come and say, you know what? When I'm going to make $1 billion, I'm giving you $1 million. Oh, the billion didn't come, and whoever said I'm going to get it. So therefore, a person cannot acquire to somebody something which has not come into this world. And even according to Rabbi Meir, that he says that a person can do such a thing, which means that that's only to something which is in this world. But something which is not in this world, which means even according to Rabbi Meir that you can be makneh devar shel olam, that's only to something which is in this world. Meaning a person cannot come and say, you know what? If to my next child. One second. Well, that's still not in the world. So even if I'm going to say the $1 billion, which is also not here, but even according to Rabbi Meir, but I can't do it because the thing which I'm acquiring it to is not in the world. But rather, Tnai Betin Shane. Here, this is something completely different because this is called Tnai Betin, meaning Ketubat Benin Dichrin, remember, was a Ketubah for her male children. Her male children are still not in the world. So therefore, since her male children are still not in the world, even according to Rabbi Meir, that you can acquire something which is not in this world, the $1 billion which still didn't come to me, but you can acquire it to somebody that is not in this world, which means the male children, which still didn't come. But here it's Tanai Betin. Hachanami, so here it's Tanai Betin, meaning that there's a special stipulation of Betin, that they made a special halacha, that she's able to come and get, it goes to her male children. So anything that she's going to bring in from properties or whatever it is, it's going to go only solely to her male children, not to the male children of the husband, right? When he passes away or when she passes away. So Elmaleh says the Bayit Rav Papa, Mishum de kamafika b'lashon yirtun, is it because you're actually teaching it in Lashon of Yerusha, right? But nevertheless, Rabbi shouldn't have said that the Lashon is Yisvun, but rather Yirtun. Remember, Yisvun is Matana. Yisvun is to carry. Yirtun is Yerusha, right? It's the same Lashon of Yerusha, which means to inherit. So Hadar Mabayis, he retracted. He says, "Lav milti damli." The time as we already learned. Lo katav la. If he did not write down, what happens if a person forgot to write down about the girls? Imagine right now the husband dies. Now all of a sudden the male children want to come. They want to take all the properties. Now he still has little girls from the second wife. Now those little girls, where are they going to get parnasa from?
They're going to go door to door and beg.
They're going to start begging? Obviously not. So technically speaking, they write down usually that the female girls that he has, they're able to, until they get married, they come and they live in the property. They eat from the property. They live in the property, right? That's usually what they write down. But what happens if a person didn't write it? He didn't write it down. Yeah. Anyway. So he says, until they're taken from men, Chayav, he's still obligated. Why? It's a stipulation from the betin. So it comes out that in such a place, a person is ki'ilu giving to one of his daughters that is a matana, and to the boys he's giving Yerusha. So anytime when you're giving partially in a present and partially as a Yerusha, so even the rabbis are going to admit that it's going to be good. It's going to be, so therefore in this case, even though he didn't write it down, the girls continue eating in the property of the husband, right, of the father, meaning of their father, and they continue eating until they're taken from men, until they actually go and get married. Okay, until you're clear, right? Which means that the girls they take from the property, not because he died early or whatever, until they get married. Yeah, exactly. Because the second they get married, that's it. The second they get married, it's not on the right. Yeah, 100%. Right. Remember the second they get married, the husband's obligated in everything. Okay, the husband has to pay for everything of hers. It's not the father. It's not the Nowadays I know it became a little bit menafochu, but no. Right. The second the second that they get married, the husbands they take completely 100%.
Go.
So Elmaleh of Nachmani, right? Elmaleh of Nechumi. Elmaleh of Nechumi, ve'itz the Elmaleh of Chananya ber Rabbi Labai. Says of Nechumi, or some people say it's of Chananya ber Rabbi Labai. Kuf lamed aleph amubet, 131b. He comes and he says, "Mimai devechad bedina itkun." 131b. Pay attention. 131b. Mimai devechad bedina itkun. How do you know that the two takanot are in the same bedin? Dilma betre bedina itkun. Maybe there were two different batei dinim that they instituted these different halachot. So says the Gemara, "Lo sal kadaitach." No, for sure we're not talking about that. The Tani Reisha, because we learned to the Reisha. V'zeh midrash tarash Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah l'pnei chachamim b'kerem Yavne. There's a midrash Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah had instituted before the chachamim in Kerem Yavne. Habanim yirshu. The boys are going to come and inherit the money of the ketubah. Habanot yizonu. And the girls are going to have mizonot. They're going to have parnasa. Ma banim enim yoshim elechad mitatveim. Just like the boys, they only inherit after the death of the father. So to the girls will not take parnasa from the nechasim until after the death of the father. So if you're going to tell me it's one betin that's instituting it, that's why you can learn one takana, one institution from another institution. But if you're going to tell me that there are two different betins, how do you learn one takana from another one? Meaning, if you're going to tell me that there are two completely different takanot, one of them was a takana from Israel, in Hag of Israel, one of the takana of Syria, right? So how are you going to tell me that you're learning the different halachot from each other? Many times they're different halachot, so you can't. But if you're going to tell me it's the same betin, So you could learn the same halachot from each other because the same bet din instituting the same halachot. So says the Gemara, Mimai, how do you know this? Really, I'm going to tell you, it was instituted in two different bedins, right? Bedina Batra Takin Bedina Kama, and the last bedin instituted it. They copied the first bedin. Meaning, many times it happens. You could have one administration. If they're going to come, they're going to say, you know what? The first administration they said A, so we're going to strengthen it and we're going to say B, right, together with it, and then that's it. Let's go. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Says Rav Yehuda Shmuel. We're talking about a new halacha. Amar Rav Yehuda Shmuel. Hakotev kol nechasav liishto. If a person comes and he writes all his properties to his wife, lo asay l'apotropa. He only appointed her as an administrator. How do you say it in English? An administrator. As an administrator, apotropos. Yes. No, not in English. In English, an administrator. Right? In Hebrew, apotropos. Yeah. Administrator. Kilu that he's a manager. Kilu that she's managing the. Yeah. No. So it says the Gemara Pshita, obviously, Beno Gadol, right? If he's going to write down Beno Gadol, Beno Katan, but why don't you wrote everything to the smaller child? Meaning, you just told me halacha about the wife. So if he wrote everything to the wife, she's just an administrator. She's the one in charge. Probably the children are still young, and therefore they're going to do it. But what about now the younger child? The same halacha would apply to the older child. If he writes everything to Beno Gadol, obviously, why does he give everything to the older child? Not because Bemet, he wants the older child to take everything. He's just administrating it to everybody else. But what about now Beno Katan? What about now the younger child? So what's halacha? So, right, so he says, Itman, it was stated of Chanilai Baridia Mashuan, Afilu Beno Katan Mutal Barisa. Even in a case that the younger child is going to be in a crib, mamash in a crib, right? A baby. So he says, obviously, he only made him an apotropos. Why did he do that? Because he wanted to give him kavod. Meaning, obviously, he can't do it. He's a baby, right? He's in a crib. But the concept was he was only doing it just for what? To give that child honor, special honor that he's an apotropos. So says the Gemara, Pshita beno ve'acher, acher bematana b'amnu apotropos. If he comes and he writes it to somebody else and to his son, the other person, whatever he was giving it to him, it was a present. But remember, he cannot give it to another guy other than a present. So whatever he wrote to the other guy was a present, and whatever he wrote to his son, he was appointing him as an administrator, as an apotropos. Okay, we skip out the brackets. Ishto arusa v'ishto grusha b'matana. Right, this is something very interesting. He comes and he writes everything to his wife that he's only engaged to her. He's not actually married to her, only engaged to her. Or something even more backwards, right? To his divorced wife. What? Yeah, he divorced her, and then he's writing everything to his divorced wife. The matana, obviously, anything that he's given is a matana. You understand? Okay. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes they get divorced, and they're meaning they're on good terms. They just were obligated to divorce for whatever reasons. Ibailehu, right? So now we're going to ask the following question: Bat etzel banim, v'isha etzel achim, v'isha etzel bnei abal, mau. Three different. One of them, a person comes and he writes everything to his daughter, but there's boys, but he wrote everything to the daughter. Second case. So we're going to see 1 second. Second case, he wrote everything to the wife, right? When there's brothers, meaning there's no boys, but there's brothers. But he wrote everything to the wife. Remember that when a person dies, right? If there's no male children, it goes to the female children. If there's no female children, it goes to his brothers. Obviously, we go first to his father. But let's say the father's not alive anymore. It would go to the wife. Never inherits anything. The wife doesn't inherit, right? Today, well, that's nowadays. But I'm saying, but mitzad halacha,
you got to remember right? That wife never inherits.
Yes, ever. Yeah. Okay. So he says the third case, v'isha etzel habal. What happens now? He wrote it to his wife, right? When right now he does have children from another woman. So he says v'isha etzel bnei habal. So he says, what's halacha? So Amar Avinu Mishmed Rava Bechulu in all these cases lo kana. They didn't acquire anything. Levar mi ishto arusa v'ishto grusha. Only the wife which is engaged or the wife which is divorced. But according to Rabbi Avira Mishmed Rava, he says bechulu kan, and all of them they do acquire it, except for Isha etzel achin, except for the woman by the brothers. The Isha etzel bnei abal, meaning the two last ones no. But other than that, right? Yes, meaning Isha etzel achin or Isha etzel bnei abal, which means there's no children but there's brothers, or there's no children but he wrote it to his wife instead of the children of the previous marriage. In those two cases, no, right? But the other ones, yes, whether it's going to be a girl by the boys or the wife which is engaged or the wife which is going to be divorced. And then we're going to have another question.